Hello, and welcome to another episode of In the Spotlight, where we shine a light on entrepreneurs, SMEs, innovators, and creatives. I'm Maxine Crow, your host, and I am delighted to be joined today by Luke Green. Luke, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Maxine. Thank you for having me.
That's great. What we'll be doing today is we'll be discovering Luke, a bit about your journey and also around your business as well. And we'll probably be plying you for some words of wisdom towards the end of the show, if that's
No
okay with
worries.
you.
No, that's absolutely fine, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so Luke, let's just start with you introducing yourself and what you do as a business and what inspired you to do what you do today.
Okay, so my business is called Ballistica, and we basically are a brand and product consulting company. So we work with brands to help them rationalize their product or service offering to customers, help them to communicate that effectively to customers, and basically support them in a role that a lot of smaller businesses and even some larger businesses don't typically have the financial support to actually bring in house. Typically, a lot of people confuse branding with marketing, and they are two very, very different things. So what we focus is on the business side and making sure that the groundwork for marketing is in place for a business to actually be able to do that themselves, or provide them with the support to find the right marketing teams, etc., to work with. So we're a bit behind the curtains, if you like, in the Wizard of Oz, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And
that does.
yeah, so I mean, and what inspired me to start the business really was I spent nearly 20 years in the music industry working with brands like Marshall Amplification, and I worked with the record label that they had, and worked in what people would typically call the corporate world, if you like. And then when I left that world, after 20 years, I was very much of the mindset I'm not going to work within the music industry anymore. I want to explore something different. I like learning new things. So for me, it was like I'd like to try something different. I spent a brief period working in a fast moving consumer goods company. And then I was also doing some consulting work on the side for a couple of friends that I knew who are serial entrepreneurs. And
Mm.
one of the realizations was that when you're working within a business itself, it's very easy to be distracted by the preconceptions of the business. So you're fighting what the business already thinks it knows about itself and its products, and it's very difficult to kind of get a true reality vision of what's going on.
Yeah.
And I also found that some companies that I did some consulting work with only needed me really for 3 or 4 months. So I was at a period in my life where I was like, well, I'll just do some consulting work here and there and just kind of enjoy myself a little bit.
Yeah.
After working very long hours, traveling around the world, doing all of the corporate thing, it was nice to just kind of take my foot off the accelerator a little while. And one of my friends who's a serial entrepreneur said, "Oh, would you mind consulting on a new project I've got, which was a med tech product, which was basically for online consulting for medical professionals."
Mhm.
Excuse me. Um, then I did that for 2 or 3 months, and he turned around to me and said, "Well, go and find yourself another client. I still need you, but go and find yourself another client." So I went and found another client, and then he essentially gave me the number of his accountant and said, "Right, now you're doing it. Go off and just run this business that you've created." And I was like, "Oh wow." Actually, I hadn't thought of it like that. So it was, I didn't leave the corporate world with the intention of setting up on my own. I left the corporate world with the intention of kind of maybe slowing down a little bit and enjoying things a little bit. And then through subterfuge, my friend kind of pushed me into setting my own business up, and it's kind of just flourished from there. Really, it's nice to be able to go in and just help people, and then once I've done the bit that they need, be able to leave. Because like I said before, not every business needs a brand director or a product director or a marketing director,
Mm.
but they do need those skills and they do need that knowledge at certain points in their journey. So it's nice to be able to go in, help people, teach them a little bit, and then be able to walk away and see what happens as a result of that. And nine times out of 10, if people put the work in that's needed to then push things forwards, then they're going to go on and have that growth or success that they want.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing, Luke. And coming from a corporate background, it's I don't know if you found as well, it's a very different kind of mindset and culture. What did you find was a challenge? Did you actually find it a challenge to transition from corporate then to doing your own thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a shock to the system because obviously I know what I can do and I know what I'm good at and I know where my skills lie. But when you're working in corporate, you're kind of surrounded by a safety net. This is why big businesses do as well as they do. So the second you start setting up on your own and you're starting to put your business plan and everything together, that's relatively easy. But then you become the IT department, and then you need to be your own marketing department, and you need to schedule things, and you don't have an assistant anymore, and you don't have a marketing team anymore, and you don't have a product design team anymore. So all of a sudden, all of these things that you assume, yeah, you basically take for granted, that you just come to realize that they're not there and you have to do them. And I think that was really the biggest challenge was like going away and saying, okay, I need help with certain things. And, that's when oh, I'm going to start business and I'm doing this business and it's going to be successful. And you're in your mind, you're just going to push, push, push. Even something so, for example, something really stupid. I sat there for like 2 or 3 days, and I'm not a graphic designer per se, but I can do graphic design, and I
Yeah.
have done graphic design stuff for clients. But I was like, I'm going to design the logo and get my website up and running and design a website. And I found the website element relatively easy. There's lots of platforms out there that will allow you to do it yourself and set it up quite well. And I struggled with the logo. And this is something that I do with my clients, is help them visualize the logo and put it together. So it's just like, this is my wheelhouse. And I was really, really struggling because I think I was just too close to
Yeah.
that issue. So I went to a local marketing agency and said, look, this is me, this is what I do, but I'm stuck. And that was the biggest challenge, was being able to just go, this bit isn't working. I need to speak to somebody else and get some help. And not having that safety net of all of these departments and people around me, it, I'm going to say courage. I don't know. It's a level of humility you need to be able to turn around and ask for help from people and ask for help on financial things and things that you, again, had a support network for. And I think a lot of people going into setting up a business don't necessarily consider all of those things in their entirety before they go into it. I've got this idea, I've got this product, I've got this idea for a brand, and I'm going to go out there and it's going to be successful because I think it's the best thing ever. And then the mechanics of building a business come in, and there's a lot of work to do.
It's
I'm not going
quite.
to put people off, but you know what I mean? It's a
Yeah, I know
lot.
what you mean, because it's like you have the idea and then you're already at the end point and forget all the gubbins in between. And it's great that you're actually sharing what the challenges are. But I would say to any listeners not to be put off by the mechanics, because I don't know if you found, Luke, since you've started your journey, there's always somebody who knows what you need. It's just, and I see what you mean about the courage as well, because it's more when you're used to kind of running at 100 miles an hour, your stuff, you're on it, you're literally the top of your industry, top of your game, and the expert that everyone goes to. And then I don't know about you, but it's kind of like it's almost like you become a baby again. And
Absolutely,
and it is
absolutely.
literally those taking those baby steps now to get to this vision that you have of what you want to do and how you want to serve people. So yeah, it can be
Absolutely,
quite
and I think,
daunting.
like you said, that shouldn't put people off. But I think if you already have a small business, or you're thinking of starting one, it's really do that research up front. Spend your time, speak to people who know about the things that you don't know about, and just build up that information. So it's not so much a shock to your system. I think it was probably a little bit arrogant when I started because I'd been, like you said, been at the top of my game within an industry and been that person. And I just kind of went, well, I can do this. And I think, that really led to that shock. But I think for anybody that's listening, if they just take a step back and do that little bit of research, it will make life much more pleasant. And there are, so, like you said, so many people out there, and online platforms as well that will help you set your business up. And there's so much out there that's available. I just kind of went in with blinkers on at 100 miles an hour and didn't think about it. So
What was there any particular sequence of events that you ended up following? Was it prescribed, or did you kind of literally just flit around? Just in terms of the question, was there a specific order of doing things?
yeah, I think at the moment that I realised, at the moment that my entrepreneur friend gave me the number of his accountant, I kind of went, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to put some structure in place, and I need to kind of identify what sort of businesses do I want to work with, where can I add value to them. I think that was like a really important point. And really kind of work out where I was going. So that was the first step, was like work out who that customer is going to be, who are those clients that I'm going to work with. And again, I think with that, I kind of got it slightly wrong, because in my head, I'm like, I don't want to work in the music side of business anymore. I want to help all of these small startups that want to start an amazing brand up and create this amazing brand. And
Yeah,
I'm still working with clients like that, but as you can see from behind me, the products from some of my clients, I'm still working with music, and actually more and more so. Now I've kind of sort of like settled into my groove, but I'm working with ed tech companies and other companies as well. But I think I tried to identify clients that I really wanted to work with, and I think maybe neglected the where I could add the most value. And obviously, with the experience that I've got, there are certain areas of industries that I can probably apply that to, more manufacturing and music specifically. So.
yeah, and it's quite interesting when you've talked about being in the music industry for so long and then wanting to move completely away from it. But I would say what I've found is that unless you're prepared, because how many years were you in the music industry?
I mean, if you count the years that I've been working with clients now as a consultant, it's going to be something like 23 years.
That's a long time.
It's
That's
pretty
a
much
lot
my
of.
whole professional life.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess that the message there really is for people that are thinking about starting a new industry. It's almost like, unless you're prepared to, how would you'd never get that 23 years, and how long would it take someone to upskill to a level where they can deliver and offer what you have? So I guess what I think is that, if someone's thinking about setting up on their own, think about where their strengths are within the industry. Would you
Absolutely.
agree?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. You play to your strengths. I mean, and also your strengths aren't always necessarily related to what you've done for work. I know, I've got to know since kind of exiting the corporate world and entering into the consulting world, a lot of people who have made businesses out of their passions, because they
Mm.
knew a lot about that particular
Yeah.
thing. Not just I enjoy snowboarding or I enjoy fishing or whatever, but they have a technical knowledge based on 20 years, 30 years of pursuing that hobby or that sport or whatever. So it doesn't necessarily have to be completely work related, but
Mm.
it needs to be something that you really have a knowledge about.
For sure. Totally agree. Totally agree. So we've talked about your challenges, Luke. Um,
Mhm.
let's talk about your actual service and how you help others.
Okay, so typically, when I start working with a client, there's an element of, we call it discovery in consulting. So we want to find out about the business. Typically, I'd like to look at a business plan if the business has got one. Not every business owner is astute enough necessarily to have a business plan, to work out what their strategy is. And again, a lot of the times that's not written down in paper, but through conversation and workshopping with them, we find out what their intended strategy is, what their product or service is, and then really kind of formulate a picture of what that is in terms of how would that appear from the perspective of the consumer. And I think that's an important thing, is a lot of businesses will plough forwards with a great idea that they've come up with and is supported perhaps by friends and family. And friends and family are great for support, but always have to take their input with a touch of salt, because a pinch of salt rather, because sometimes they just want to support you and they'll tell you what you want to hear. So
Yeah.
getting that feedback from the market, looking what people are saying about other products and services in the same field, and help them formulate an idea of what their brand is around that. And for different businesses, it will be different things. Some people will just want some support and some advice on direction. So that
Mm.
might be a few sessions where we're just working through something and then go, okay, I know what I want to do now, what I need to do, and I've got an idea. Some will want a full brand guideline, so they'll want, visual stuff, the way words should work. And
Yeah.
some of them really want what I would call the full package in terms of brand support, which is looking at how their product relates to their brand, how that talks to the customer, does it align? A lot of the times there's an amazing product and very poor branding, or the other way around, and it's making sure that aligns so that in the eyes of somebody that approaches that brand, they go, I understand what this is, and I understand why it's for me, or I understand why it's not for me.
Mm.
And that's also an important thing. So that's really what I offer. It's like bringing a brand director or a product director into the business, and then utilizing my knowledge and skills for as long as needed with a brand. And like I said, for example, some of them could be just one or two sessions.
Yeah.
Some of them, I've got a client at the moment that I've been working for 23 months now.
Hmm. Wow.
And essentially, we've gone from a realignment of their product and rebranding, through to then wanting to do a brand launch, so relaunching a brand, and now through to expanding from European distribution and marketing to global distribution and marketing, and growing that with them. So, you know, the projects scale depending on what the customer actually needs. And there are, and again, not meaning to sound negative, because we're trying to encourage and support people in business, but there are some clients where I'll do one session and just say, look, I don't know that this is actually a brand or a business that's got any potential. It
Mm.
has in the idea stage, but I don't see where this goes. And sometimes they'll go away and work on a strategy and stuff and come back 6 months later and say, here it is, and you go, okay, I can see how that would work now.
Yeah.
And sometimes they just disappear. And I think it's cruel to encourage a business to move forwards if there really isn't a business there. So I think that's a part of what I do, as well as a little bit of a reality check.
Yeah. And what do you find? So in terms of brand, typical brand errors, what would you advise the audience? Say if it was your top three things just not to do with their branding, what would they be?
The first one would be, do not copy anything that already exists in the market. And that's actually easier said than done, because we subconsciously every day absorb brands, their logos, their coloring, the way they talk, through the radio, podcast, advert, everything. We're just absorbing these brands all of the time.
Mm.
And we associate good things with good brands that have good products. So when
Yeah.
we go into that field, our brain starts to lead us down that route, and sometimes that can be a real negative. So make sure that you're unique in the way that you appear, and the way that your product appears. The second one is, and I think it's less of an issue now, but certainly up to sort of like 3 or 4 years ago, there was this movement. I think it's you can call it a movement,
Yeah.
where people were essentially sourcing products from China, putting a logo on it and saying, this is my brand, here's these products. And
Yeah.
that's really not a brand. That's drop shipping with a logo on something. And I think people have wised up to that with things like Temu and Alibaba and things like that. People know that you can access cheap products from the Far East and put brands on them. And I think people are less and less inclined to buy those
Yeah.
quote unquote brands. So if you think you've got a brand just because you've come up with a look and a feel and the way you talk, and you think you can just slap it on something, my advice would be, that's not a brand. You need to think of how you differentiate yourself and make your product better. for the customer. And I think the third one, and I think this is really, really important, is a lot of people, when they develop and build a brand, at least in the first stages, look at it only from their perspective. And I think I kind of touched on this before, but really, that is a big mistake. You need to look at it from the perspective of the person who's potentially buying the product.
Yeah.
Um, Tech companies are awful for this, where they'll create a brand and a product that appeals and is understandable to somebody that already uses another person's piece of software.
Yeah.
But in their branding and their messaging and the way they position themselves, they completely forget that there are potentially thousands of other customers that need what that piece of software does, but don't understand the language and the technicalities of the competitor. So they could come into the market with an advantage by explaining what they do and how a product can benefit somebody better than Microsoft or Apple or any of those big brands. There is an element of thinking where you can create a brand and make a product that can beat bigger brands at their own game if you use a language that the customer's going to understand and you're going to reach out to them in that right space.
Yeah, I can really resonate with that, Luke, because if I think about being in the facility management industry, growing up in the facility management industry, and then it's the acronyms and the industry language that,
Yeah.
yeah, everyone in the industry will know it. But then you're right. What about everybody else that has a similar need? So I've struggled with. I mean, my brand is mobilization mastery, and to the ear, you kind of think, well, what the hell is that? And so you have to just, I get it. You just have to completely rethink how you think about your brand. And then
Yeah.
when people's going, oh well, nobody understands that, and I'm just thinking, does that mean I have to just rebrand everything now because nobody understands it? And I mean, what would you? I mean, it has a nice ring to it, but equally, okay, what would you say to someone that's listening that would say, "Oh my gosh, I don't know how to reposition my brand to address other target markets or other audiences?"
That's a really, really good question. And actually, it's kind of a quite typical question in kind of the area that I work in. It's like, we've existed for 10, 15 years, but we know that we need to be there. And the answer is actually in the question. It's like, if you know where you need to go from a business perspective, if you know that you have a large number of customers that just aren't biting, and they're in a different location to where you're currently sitting as a brand in the market, really it's doing the research and finding out, well, what are the brands that are connecting doing differently
Yeah,
to what you're doing? What is it that is either putting them off or meaning that you're not being seen in the market with what you do? Um, and a lot of the times, businesses overanalyze it, and then they draw in these preconceptions of, well, we've always done it this way and our customers love this because.
yeah,
Typically, you're not going to lose your existing customers if you change things, because they're already your customers. I mean, there have been terrible brand faux pas where brands have lost customers because they've done a huge rebrand and alienated their kind of audience. But typically, if you adjust your positioning and your brand voice and the way that you're portraying the brand to customers to meet the needs of another consumer base, typically you won't lose your existing
yeah,
customers.
yeah,
There is a caveat to that, though. It's again going back to, I think the first point was not copying the competition. So it's finding out, why is that thing that they're doing appealing? Is it because the wording is more simple? Is it because they're offering a free trial with a video conference that can help onboard that client? Is there something that they're doing? What is it, that specific thing? And then how can you do that better? Is it working? Would it perhaps be better that they just get sent a video rather than having to log in and do it on a platform? Thinking of
yeah,
all of those customer journeys and how it relates to how the customer wants to buy, how the customer wants to interact with the brand, rather than how you want to do it for them, because very often there are two different things. And that's the struggle in business, because you very often don't want to do it the way that the customer wants, because for you it's more work. But actually, if you do that more work, you're going to be more appealing, and you're going to be able to position yourself where your brand is appealing to them, because you take away that extra effort that they have to put into reach it.
Yeah, you made such a valid point there, especially um all I heard when you were talking there was customer, customer, customer. It is absolutely, I mean, and plus as well, I think when when you have a business and that you start, it's your baby, your passion, or whatever it might be, you're very insular and thinking about it from that internal perspective. But you're absolutely right. It's the customer and how
Yeah,
we're going to meet the demand of and their needs. That's so
yeah.
important. So important.
And on a larger scale, I mean, one of the things that I do with some clients is we'll have a product for them, and we'll either get users or buyers, so maybe distributors or retailers, or even end users, into a room to talk about the products that that brand makes, the products that competitors make, and how does that all fit in the grand scheme of things? How are they perceived? You know, that kind of direct, it costs money to do that, and it's time, and setting up and renting the hotel space, or if the brand's got a big enough space to host something like that, that all costs time and money. But the feedback you get is so useful. It really tells you what people are actually thinking, and
Yeah,
people, when you ask them via an email or a survey, are very quick to respond. Whereas if you've got them arguing in a room, and I mean arguing in a pleasant way, but
yeah,
actually, debating the whys and wherefores of the brand and the products, that feedback naturally comes to places where, well, if I just do that with the branding, this will click there. If I just change the product offering to add this and remove this, it's going to make more sense to the customer. So that kind of feedback is so important.
yeah, yeah. Some really great hacks and words of wisdom there from your experience, and really thank you for sharing. And I hope for our listeners that you've got your pen and paper ready, because there's a lot that Luke's sharing of value for us today. So Luke, let's just talk a little bit around your journey as an entrepreneur. So how do you manage the unique challenges faced by like an SME, especially in terms of competition? So being in branding, marketing, it's quite a I would say, is it saturated, or have you been able to manage and find your niche?
Yeah, I think that's one of those yes and no answers. If I'm honest, Maxine, it's, for me, I deliberately positioned what I do as branding and product related as a consultancy, and as I mentioned before, not marketing.
Yeah,
There are marketing and creative design agencies out there that do branding, but what I would say is that as a service is very helpful if you know what your brand is, your product is, what your strategy is. That's fine, because
yeah,
you can go to them with a brief and say, "Hi, this is me, and this is what I need, and put it all together for me," and away we go. But those agencies typically don't have a specialist. In fact, most of them that I've dealt with don't have a specialist who understands that behind the curtains elements of the way that the business and the brand and the product and service all interact. And really, that's a whole different kind of mindset. It's
yeah,
not about making it pretty. I have been approached by marketing agencies who want that for their client, because the client has been specific that they don't want a superficial, here's a brand pack solution.
yeah,
And typically, my journey with a client will be, I will help them with the brand guidelines elements, but I will go to a freelancer or a design agency to do the logos. It's
yeah,
it's an additional cost for the client, but that's
yeah,
not my wheelhouse. And honestly, what I do is expensive. Why would I charge a client for something that I can go through an agency and get a graphic designer to do on an hourly rate much more cost effectively for the client?
yeah,
So it's kind of balancing. Would I love to design logos and draw stuff all day? Absolutely. But that's just not good value. So I've literally gone, okay, this is my position. I'm a consultant. I have a consultant who works within the business now on digital content and digital media and such because I needed that expertise within the business.
Yeah.
But again, that's not my speciality. That's not my wheelhouse. So it's literally that high level stuff, which and not to put off small businesses approaching, people like myself. We still work with those, but it's very much on a more superficial level to try and hold their hands to get them to the right place.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I guess when you're as a business deciding where you're going to specialize, because especially with it being so broad, just looking at, like, when you talk about my facilities management industry, it's just so broad. So
Yeah,
dumbing down, and I guess for listeners, when they're thinking about what they're going to be doing, or if they've already started in business, are they too broad? Do they need to niche a little bit more to then really pinpoint their offering? I guess
yeah,
is
absolutely. And I don't, even myself, as a business, we've started niching back into the music industry
mm,
because we know that's where we can provide the most value to people. But I suppose the way we look at it is we want to work with rock star brands. So
yeah,
if it's lipstick and it wants to be the rock star of lipsticks, then absolutely we can help with that because we understand that mentality. But
yeah,
if it's lipstick and they want to be green, environmentally friendly, and position themselves that way, we're probably not the right people to help with that side of the business because that's just not in our mentality. We are kind of a little bit brash and a little bit edgy, I think, in terms of the way that we approach things.
yeah, yeah. So just in terms of advice now, what is the best piece of advice you've received as an entrepreneur?
Don't count on any business until you've got a piece of paper in front of you. And I learned that the hard way. I had a very great call with a largish company. We had a big project that was supposed to be 6 months, and it was a really, really expensive job. And I was reaching out to additional freelancers to come on board to be part of this rather large project. Um, and then right at the last second, the email came through. No, we've got the budget's been pulled for this. We can't do that. We'll approach it maybe in a year or so. And again, I was a little naive because I had a team around me when I was in corporate that dealt with all of that stuff, and
Yeah,
in my head was like, this is brilliant. This is a solid 6 months of work for us to do. And but if you don't have a piece of paper in front of you that is a contract or an agreement, then you've got nothing. And I
yeah,
think a lot of small businesses do struggle because they'll agree to do work for people. They'll go and do some work for people on the premise that they think they're going to get paid. They don't necessarily discuss what their product or service is going to cost up front. Then they turn around and try and invoice the client because they're afraid. A lot of people are afraid of asking for money, and then they find out they're not getting paid, or they find out it takes forever to get the payment for something. And unless you have some sort of agreement, even an email confirmation is better
yeah,
than nothing. But having something that verifies that there's an agreement in place, and that piece of advice came after I discovered that was a problem. It was me
yeah,
complaining to people, and they're like, "Why didn't you have? If I give you any piece of advice, just get it in writing." I'm like, "Yeah, I know that now, but."
yeah.
So
At the
it came
time,
after the fact.
yeah, and I get it as well, because when, especially when it's a new venture, you're just so excited, and the passion overflows, and a lot of the legalities and all those hard conversations get left behind. It should actually be the first conversation, and
Yeah,
I'd say, just as learning as you have, get comfortable with the uncomfortable conversation, get comfortable with asking for the money, get comfortable with chasing the invoice
yeah,
for you take that time and that dedication to deliver a service, and it's part of, even a verbal agreement, by the way, is an agreement. However, yes, you should get that piece of paper. That's great advice. um what advice would you give to budding entrepreneurs or innovators?
um, starting a journal or getting a sketch pad or just something that you can lay down your ideas as and when you have them is a super, super important piece of advice. I think if you're like, got this idea in your head, even if it's not formulated into something meaningful that can be a business,
Yeah.
get it down somewhere. I've got sketchbooks everywhere with drawings and scribblings and ideas in, and some of them will turn into something one day, some of them won't, but they're there and I can go
Yeah.
back to them. And you know, if you've done a load of scribblings and come up with some ideas, and that you get to the end of the day and you've just had enough and you're miserable, just write it down. Right, oh, today was just felt awful. I've done all of this stuff and I feel like I haven't got anywhere. And there's a reminder to you of your journey as you're going along, and it helps build up that confidence as you go. That well, actually, you do have these points when you're in a negative state of mind, but you got past it, and you got past it. And I think for a budding entrepreneur or inventor or designer or you know whatever field we're talking about is just for God's sake, put it down, write it down somewhere, or type it. Just do something with it.
Mm.
Don't sit there and procrastinate in your own mind, because that stuff will disappear as time goes by, and you'll lose, you know, really interesting stuff that could be great for you.
Yeah. Do you know, it's quite interesting. There's a lady that I listen to called Caroline Myers, and in one of her books, she basically said procrastination, it isn't procrastinating as in preventing, not just putting off what you're doing now. What you're actually doing is putting off your future. That's
Yeah,
basically what you're doing. You're stopping all that great stuff from happening and coming to fruition.
and I think the thing is people are afraid of making mistakes, and making mistakes is part of learning. You don't If you don't make mistakes, you don't learn what doesn't work. If that makes sense.
So true.
You know, and I think it was, I can't remember. It was one of, it might have been Barack Obama, or it was definitely an American president. Said, "You look, make a decision when you're at 40% certain." And to most people, that sounds like crazy advice. Why would I make a decision when I'm not over half of my percentage points certain that this is a good idea? And it's like, well, at that point, it's traveling in the right direction.
Yeah.
Do it. Think in the back of your mind it might fail or it might succeed. Ride it through. And there's that term, isn't there? Fail fast. I think
Yeah.
it's probably overused these days, but it's true. Is if you've got an idea and you think it's good, then test it. And if it fails, that's fine. You know it's failed. You can
Yeah.
find out why it's failed. You can ask those questions, but you know, don't be afraid to make those mistakes. It's a big part of the learning process.
Oh, definitely. And you never. And if you keep being afraid of the mistakes, you're never gonna know what's around the corner. You're
And
never
look,
gonna
look. I mean,
see what's.
I was very fortunate. It must have been 15, no, maybe 15 years ago, to spend time down with the guys at Google, and there was Facebook there, and they were working with a company that they had acquired, which eventually that part of what they'd acquired got rolled into the back end of Facebook. It became part of Facebook. And I said to the entrepreneur that started this app, as it was back then, you know, you've got a really good business deal from this. You know that 6 months after this is integrated into Facebook, they're kicking you out of your own business because they're not going to need you anymore. And he said, yeah, but this is how these big companies work. They've got enough money that they will get everything they can, bring it in, throw it at the wall, and if 1 in 10 things sticks, then it's still going to make them money. So
Yeah.
they're, you know, even these massive companies, and albeit it's a different scale to these small companies that we're talking to,
Yeah.
will invest in things to try them and go, that didn't work, that didn't work, we'll pursue this bit's working and we'll put a bit more effort into this. So yeah, don't be afraid.
Yeah, that's so true. Let's just move on to a little personal now. So I've got this running tally around work-life balance or work-life harmony. So far, so far, work-life harmony is literally it's 2-0. So where are you? Where how do you maintain work-life balance, especially with demands of running a business? And are you work-life balance or work-life harmony?
Currently, neither, unfortunately. Um,
Oh,
I'm trying to achieve the work-life balance. I mean, look, When setting up there are a lot of advantages of setting up your own business, and it has blessed me. I mean, I've got two kids. One's 13, one's about to turn 18, and for the last 3 years, I've got to spend more time with them than I would have ever been able to do while I was working in that corporate kind of
Yeah.
work structure. You know,
Yeah.
my son can get home from school and say, "I want to go fishing," and I can go, "Yep, let's go." Carve out 2 hours. I can do that extra 2 hours when I get back. It's not a problem. So I'd be lying if I wasn't saying there is not advantages, but there is also this thing of when you're, and we touched on it earlier, when you are running a business, before you've built up a big enough team, you are IT, you are HR, you are
Yeah.
marketing, you are all these things. So the objective is a work-life balance, but not quite there yet.
Mm.
But compared to corporate, oh my god, it's so much better. It's so much better.
I reckon when we had COVID and the lockdown, and even though it was quite traumatic, especially for people with young kids that had to then educate at home, or they didn't have the space to cohabit 24/7. I think that was a real catalyst and a shift in like work cultures as well. Especially, I mean, I'm from the corporate background as well, so I get that 24/7. However, when you're not in an office every day, you're starting to recognize quality.
Yeah.
People are still trying to cling on to that. You do hear now the phrase, the hybrid working, where some people are now being asked to go back into the office, and it's going to have an impact mentally as well on how
Yeah, and
productive they are.
I'm a massive fan of I say work from everywhere, not work from
Mm,
anywhere. It's like work from
mm,
everywhere. I think everybody should have the ability to work from everywhere. However, there are situations where that is just not practical, and
yeah, yeah,
I think in terms of, especially younger generations coming into the workplace, I think being going into the office and having people around them that have experience and stuff is important in their
yeah,
learning curve and
yeah. I
their
agree.
development and their ability to get somewhere in the world. But then there are also lots of roles where you do not need that person to be in an office. This my digital social media guy, he asked me, and I'm like, I don't care. It's like if your band is on tour in Europe, as long as you've got your laptop and you're doing the work in between everything else that you're doing, I really, really don't care.
Yeah,
I don't care if you're doing it on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, so that you can have the middle of the week doing whatever it is you want. It doesn't matter as long as you're getting the
yeah,
work done. But you have to have that element of trust, and I think this is why a lot of big businesses are struggling with this because they struggle to trust the workforce when they can't see them. I think that's the problem. I don't think it's really to do with output and the amount of work that's getting done. It's to do with that trust. And there are still a generation, even younger, senior managers who are sort of like in their 20s and 30s that have got senior roles struggle to trust people when they can't see them. They don't
yeah.
have that confidence. Um, and ironically, most of the time, when you give people that flexibility, they probably put more hours in than they should do
Yeah,
because
it's
they
it's,
get
it's
carried away with it. And.
yeah, it's true. I mean, I remember like 30 years ago being very operational, and in facilities there are roles. You're on a site, you're manning that site, managing it. So, in those types of roles, yes, you can see that you wouldn't be home based because you're client facing. So there are some
Yeah, and
exceptions.
manufacturing and
Mm,
construction, and there's whole reams of things that just aren't possible to do from
mm,
home. But certainly in this sort of role, with what you do, with what I do, that remote working is actually for me it's been amazing. I mean,
yeah.
half of my clients are in Europe. There's two clients in America. I mean, I wouldn't be able to work in an office for those clients because I would just bankrupt myself with airfares. So it's
Yeah, that's true. And I always say that the world has become a smaller place with digitalization and
yes,
technology. It's brilliant. It's
yeah,
brilliant.
it is. It really is. It's fantastic.
So Luke, how do you ensure that you stay as the go-to expert in this area? What makes you unique?
What makes me unique? It's my experience. That's the real big thing. I mean, I worked for the leading brand in guitar amplification. It's recognised around the world from Jimi Hendrix to Kerry King, just like all of these famous guitarists have been seen on stage. And ironically, when I started at Marshall, I didn't actually start at Marshall as a senior director or manager. I started on the shop floor building cabinets in the factory.
Yeah.
I was hammering rivets into the corner of the cabinets in the factory. And, for me, it was like, oh my God, there's a Marshall on the stage. I might have built that. That's amazing. I mean, I was a kid, but yeah.
Yeah.
But then once you're in that, it's like you start to be able to have conversations with people within the industry that want to impart their knowledge onto you. It's like, why should you distribute the product in this country in a certain way? Why should you structure a sales deal in a certain way? Why would you not do that with a product? What would be the drop? All of these things you just
Yeah.
pick up over time. And,
Yeah.
there may be, to my knowledge, the number of people you can count on two hands that have that experience and understanding within the industry that are available. And of those 10 people, I think 6 or 7 of them are actually in full-time employment with brands.
Yeah.
I just chose to go that other direction with the consulting route. So that kind of really makes me very, very unique in that sense. And then for brands that aren't in the music industry, what makes me unique is I'm not thinking and acting like a typical corporate consulting company, like most people would experience. It's
Yeah.
that, not the stiff collar. I mean, I'm quite happy to turn up in a t-shirt. I like to wear smart clothes when I go to meetings and stuff, but I'm quite happy to dress up in some ripped jeans and a t-shirt
Mm.
and spend half a day on a factory shop floor with a brand, talking to the people that make stuff and experiencing how stuff made, because that's that kind of rock and roll thing. It's like, yeah, you might be getting on the stage at the end of the night and doing a performance, but you've also got to carry your gear from the van, put it back in the van, and sleep on the floor of the van
Yeah.
sometimes, because if
Yeah.
that's what's needed, that's what's needed. So it's that kind of mentality. So the uniqueness is that willingness to roll the sleeves up and just live that kind of rock and roll consulting.
Yeah, it's so important, especially when you're thinking of going out and starting a business. There's a dear friend basically said, oh, if you're looking at a different market, you need to understand that market. So actually get yourself in that market. You have to just
Yeah.
immerse yourself in it to actually really truly understand it. I really get that. Really get that.
One thing I wanted to just say though, because you said something about acronyms earlier, we were talking
Acronyms,
about
yes.
acronyms.
I hope I didn't use
When,
any.
No, no, I think you referenced them, but you didn't kind
I
of
did.
explain what they were, which is fine. But one of the things I will say for new business people or people starting out is, do not be put off by acronyms. I mean, some people will be coming and they don't know what a CPC is, and they don't know what an ROI is, and all of these things. Just look it up and then understand the meaning of it. You don't need to use acronyms all the time in the way you talk within a business. If it's how much money does this make me instead of ROI, then just write how much money does this. It can be
Yeah.
quite daunting for some people.
Yeah, that's really true, and I think as well, when you're in a specific industry that you just have, every industry has its acronyms, and when you're
Yeah,
in the industry, you know the acronyms, you know the language, and I guess for listeners, it's when you're moving and you're expanding your target market, and it might be a different market. Um, some acronyms might end up being the same initials but mean
yeah,
different
they can
things.
be. Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
so you have to really check and don't be afraid to ask someone what an acronym means when you're starting those
yeah.
conversations. It's quite
And
important.
ChatGPT is your friend in those scenarios. It's like, what does this mean in this scenario? And let
Yeah,
ChatGPT help you, because and for lots of things actually, using some AI is a good thing, as long as you use it as a personal assistant and not an employee. It's
yeah,
never going to tell you the whole truth all of the time. But if you've got a quick question, it's a good place to just click on and ask some questions.
yeah, and you can actually get it on WhatsApp now, which means that you've literally got chat in your pocket twenty
Exactly.
four seven. Um, just some final thoughts. Is there a book, podcast, or resource that's been quite influential on you?
Yeah, I think probably a lot of people will be familiar with Simon Sinek. He is, or Sinek, I can't remember how you
Cynic,
pronounce it
cynic.
properly.
Yeah.
He wrote an amazing book called It Starts With Why.
Mm,
Um, it, it's really designed for kind of organizational stuff, but it's if you read the book and understand it, it's about a process, and it's about repeatedly asking why until you find the absolute core of that question. And for brands, it's an important thing. It's like, oh, we're going to call ourselves this because we're the best. It's like, but why are you the best? Oh, we're the best because of this. And you really need to get down to that kind of base level of why before you understand what a brand's about. And
Yeah.
I use a lot of references to that book when I'm working with clients to try and get their minds focused on. It's great to say that you're the best in the world.
Yeah.
Prove it. Why? And just it's like being a petulant toddler for hours, but it's so effective. And I think if business owners read that and keep that theory in their head, it will go a long way to helping them in terms of being effective. And there's another one as well, which is by a guy called General Stanley McChrystal. Trying to remember the name of the book.
Was it Stan Crystal?
1 second, let me.
Yeah, have a chat.
One
Pop
second,
it
let
in
me.
chat.
No, I'll. Have you got enough time to overrun slightly?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah,
Okay, that's fine.
we're
So
good. We're good. We're
I'll
good on
start again
time.
on that bit. Let me have a look. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, it's fine. So Luke's just gone to get one of these books that he highly recommends our audience reading. It's just been some really great shares and a lot of value that he's given us today.
There you go. Hopefully you can edit that down. Right. Team of Teams. So, yeah, there is another book as well that
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend. It's called Team of Teams by General Stanley McChrystal.
Team of Teams. What's it about?
Yeah.
What's it about?
It's it's a weird it's a weird one, and then trying to explain how it's useful to SMEs is weird. It's essentially about obviously, I think the clue's in the name. The guy was a general in the US Army.
Yeah.
And it's really about explaining the difference between a complicated problem and a complex problem, and the fact that those two things are very different things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's talking about trying to work out strategy of your enemy, and not saying that other brands that you're competing against are necessarily your enemy in that
Yeah.
sense, but
Yeah.
working out and how a complicated problem is just something that's difficult to solve, whereas a complex problem goes off in different routes, and it's kind of how to think in a way that A helps you decide is it a complex or a complicated problem, and then
Yeah.
B helps you strategize how to deal with those things based on that experience. And then, in his case in the book, it's a life and death stuff. But if you then turn that on its head and make it about your business and how you're going to compete in the marketplace, it can be incredibly rewarding in terms of insights of trying to find out
Yeah.
how and where you go with what you're doing.
I like that. A Team of Teams.
Team of Teams by General Stanley McChrystal.
General Stanley. I'll have to pop that in our chat when we do a summary for this recording. It's been really great speaking with you today. And what's one message or lesson that you'd like our listeners to take away from our conversation? I know that there's been lots of great content today from you, Luke, and thank you so much for being so open
No,
and
you're more than
sharing.
welcome. I think one word of advice is don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to, maybe go to a local networking. I mean, that's how we met.
Yeah,
both went to the same networking
yeah,
event over in Milton Keynes. Don't be afraid to approach people and ask for help. Most, if not all, business owners will happily provide nuggets of advice to help you on your way. And as long as you're clear about what you're asking for, uh, as long as you're clear about what you're asking for, they will deliver that help for you or point you in the right direction.
yeah,
I've had situations where a client of mine needed some financial advice, and I'm not a financial person, but I know somebody that is a financial advisor. And I said, look, can you just connect with this person and have a conversation? I don't think it's a paid project or a paid job for you, but
Yeah.
it will. I'd really appreciate it if you could just answer this question because I don't quite understand it. And again, 9 times out of 10, people will do that. So if you come up against a brick wall or you find something you're just not comfortable answering when you're writing a business plan or doing whatever, just ask. Just ask. That's the best piece of advice I can give. Is ask people.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Luke, how can our listeners connect with you?
Um, Ballistica is on Instagram and Facebook, but contact us via our website, via the email, phone number on the website if they want anything. Um, More than happy to speak to anyone and give discovery calls and little bits of advice and information where I can.
Mm,
And well, this is precisely why I wanted to come on this podcast. To be honest,
yeah.
is why I like sharing that. I mean, on top of my consulting work, I'm a non-executive director of 2 companies, and I sit on the advisory board of Leeds University Music School with their industrial advisory board. So I love being able to help and contributing. It keeps my
Yeah.
mind quite sharp if I can dive out and try and deal with some problems that are not in my day to day. So yeah,
Mm.
it's just if people have got problems, I'm quite happy to try and field them. I just hope I don't get an inbox full of them.
There's an AI for
Oh,
that.
there is an AI for that. There's an AI for everything these days,
There
mate.
really is. There really is. Do you have any up and coming events or webinars where you actually share content knowledge and interact with potential audiences or
I
public?
don't have anything that's open for the public. I do on the website. There is a book, a downloadable book, which is a digital PDF on brand
Yeah.
and advice for people on brand. And if they've got an existing brand or they're thinking of creating one from scratch, they can download that for free. And I'll send you the link for that so that you can add
Yeah.
that in so people can access that. And
Great.
that I think is a good read. I have done talks on it before with various groups, and then I'm doing a private seminar, well, panel discussion with a company called Connected in London, which is a non-executive director network. So I'm
Mm.
sitting on a panel there on the 12th of March. I don't know whether they're going to record that and publish it, but that might be interesting for people who are interested in maybe pursuing non-executive director roles if they've got a particular skill set. But it's kind of separate from
Yeah.
my regular business.
Yeah. Luke, it's just been an absolute delight, and thank you so much for sharing the afternoon with us in the
No
spotlight.
worries.
Okay.
No
Until
worries.
next time, this has been Luke Green from Ballistica. Ballistica.
Yeah,
From
it's a
Ballistica.
mouthful.
Do you know what? It sounds like a heavy metal band. It really does.
May or may not be intentional.
Well, there's some subliminal stuff going on there for sure. But Luke, it's been an absolute pleasure. This has been an episode of In the Spotlight with Luke Green. Thank you so much. Until next time, we'll see you soon.